If you have saved $1 million for retirement, you have done something genuinely hard. But if you're in Canada, I can tell you as a financial advisor for over 20 years that $1 million isn't the finish line you think it is. There are 5 things built right into the Canadian system that can quietly take that number apart. And I don't want to see that happen to you. Let's start with the one that makes people the angriest. Old age security sounds simple. You turn 65. You get a monthly check, currently about $728 if you're under 75, just over $800 if you're older. For a couple, that's more than $17,000 a year. Not life-changing, but real money you've been counting on your whole working life. Here's what most people don't realize until it's too late. OAS isn't universal. If your net world income passes roughly $93,000, the government starts taking it back at 15 cents on the dollar. By the time your income reaches about $149,000, your OAS is gone. That's $17,000 a year for a couple? Zero. Now here's the gotcha. Your net world income includes RRSP and RRIF withdrawals, CPP payments, pension income, and even half of your capital gains. So you've got a couple with $1 million in RRSPs who also received 2 OAS checks, and we're expecting 2 OAS checks. Once the RIF withdrawals kick in at 71, their income passes that clawback threshold without anyone living like a millionaire. I saw this play out more times than I can count. A couple walks into my office thinking they've got an extra $17,000 a year coming in. And then the CRA letter arrives and the math changes. Overnight. Nobody warns you about this when you're 40 and maxing out your RRSP. They just tell you to save. And that lost OAS money stings even more when you realize what it was supposed to cover. We tell ourselves a story in this country. We're Canadian. Healthcare is covered. We don't have to worry about medical bills the way Americans do. That story is mostly true. Until it's not. Here's what Medicare doesn't cover: dental care, vision care, prescription drugs unless you're in a province with a limited senior drug plan, and even those have deductibles and copays. Hearing aids? Physiotherapy? Most medical devices. Most of us have extended health benefits through an employer our whole working lives, so we never notice the gaps. But the day you retire, those benefits usually disappear. You're left buying private insurance, which runs about $150 to $300 a month, per person depending on your age. And coverage. That's for dental, for your glasses, for the medications that nearly a quarter of seniors take 5 or more of. A crown at the dentist costs $1,000 to $1,500. Dentures, $2,000 to $4,000. Hearing aids, $2,000 to $6,000 a pair. These aren't luxury items. This is basic maintenance for a body that has been working for 65 years. And if you lose your OAS to the clawback, you're paying for all of this out of a smaller pool of money than you planned on. So the government takes back your pension, and the things that pension was supposed to help cover aren't covered in the first place. But here is where the system really tightens the screws. This is the one that in my 20 years as an advisor caught more people off guard than anything else. And it's so avoidable if you see it coming. Most people don't. Your RRSP defers tax. You put money in, get a deduction, it grows tax-free, and you pay tax when you take it out. The government is patient, but not forever. By December 31 of the year you turn 71, your RRSP must be converted into arrears. Here's the part nobody tells you. Once it's a RIF, the government decides your minimum income, not you. At age 71, you must withdraw 5.28% of the balance. At 75, that rises to 5.82%. At 80, it's 6.82%. By 95, it's 20%. Every dollar of that withdrawal is taxable at your full marginal rate. So do the math. $1 million in a RIF at 71 means at least $52,800 in forced taxable income that year, whether you need it or not. Add 2 CPP checks at maybe $17,000 each, if you contributed at the maximum, and suddenly you're well past that OAS clawback threshold, without trying. And because the withdrawal is mandatory, it counts as income even if you just move it to another account. The cascade is what really hurts. Forced income pushes you into a higher tax bracket. That triggers the OAS clawback. Less net income forces you to withdraw more, More withdrawal means even more taxable income the following year. It's a spiral. Your spending plan doesn't matter. The formula at the CRA does? The worst part? You can see it coming from a mile away if someone points it out. But most people don't look at their RRSP and think, that's a future tax liability. They think, that's my nest egg. I'll come back to what you can do about this, because there are strategies that work. But first, there's something that happens so slowly you don't notice it until you're 80 and the math has shifted under your feet. Most retirement planning starts with the 4% rule. Withdraw 4% of your portfolio in year 1, adjust for inflation, and your money should last 30 years. The basic idea is reasonable. The problem is that adjusting for inflation isn't a small footnote, especially in a country where the tax system taxes your nominal returns rather than your real ones. Say inflation is 2.5% and your investments earn 5%. Your real return, what actually grows your purchasing power, is 2.5%. But you pay tax on the full 5%. The taxman doesn't care that inflation ate half your gain. That's a silent drag that compounds over decades, and it hits harder in taxable accounts and RIFs, where every dollar of growth is eventually taxed. Meanwhile, the things you actually buy in retirement don't always track the headline inflation number. CPI rose 2.1% on average in 2025, a manageable-sounding number. But housing, healthcare, home care, the stuff that dominates a retiree's budget, rises faster than the overall basket the CPI measures. CPP and OAS are indexed, but to headline CPI, what you get to spend doesn't keep up with what you actually have to spend. You don't feel inflation year to year. You feel it when you're 80 and realize the money doesn't stretch as far and there's nobody left to call who can write you a paycheck. But there's one cost that makes all of these look small, and it's the one nobody wants to talk about. I've been around this business long enough to know that people plan for vacations in helping their grandkids with school. Nobody plans for long-term care, and that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Here's what it costs. In Ontario, a private room in a long-term care facility runs about $3,000 a month right now. That's the subsidized rate. Private retirement homes, assisted living, home care, those numbers are significantly higher, often $4,000 to $7,000 a month or more. And healthcare costs don't rise at the same pace as the general cost of living. They rise faster. If care costs grow at 6% a year, which is roughly the historical trajectory, that $3,000 a month becomes nearly $5,400 in 10 years and more than $9,600 in 20 years. Now think about a 2.5-year stay, which is about the average. At $9,600 a month, you're looking at nearly $290,000. A longer stay runs past $500,000, and it's not unusual for both people in a couple to need care, sometimes at the same time. That's on top of everything else. The OAS that got clawed back, the dental work, the prescriptions, the RIF withdrawals bumping up your marginal rate, inflation quietly shrinking what your dollar buys, and then long-term care arrives at the end, when your portfolio is already thinner than it was at 65. This is the collision point where my whole philosophy about retirement hits reality. I talk all the time about not wasting the youth of your senior years, about being deliberate about those 1,000 weeks of healthy time you have left. But part of being deliberate is looking squarely at what the back half of retirement actually costs, because you can't squeeze the juice out of your 60s and early 70s if you're terrified about running out of money at 85. So what do you do with all of this? Here's the thing. Every one of these gotchas is worse if your savings are concentrated in an RRSP, and every one gets easier to manage if you've got money in a TFSA where withdrawals don't count as income. A thoughtful drawdown strategy that starts pulling from RRSPs before 71, that maximizes your TFSA every year, that keeps an eye on that clawback threshold. That's the difference between a plan that holds up and one that quietly comes apart. I'll walk through exactly how to build that strategy in another video. Until then, take your $1 million number and run these 5 tests against it. If it holds up, you've got a real plan. If it doesn't, you still have time to fix it. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.